The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Welcome to today's webinar entitled Career Pathing. Is it the new performance appraisal? My name is Linda Ginac and I'm the CEO of Talent Guard. Talent Guard is a full-service, competency-based talent management software company, and I'll talk a little bit about the company at the end. I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to learn more about how to improve employee engagement with some of the ideas that I will discuss here. A couple housekeeping notes. The presentation is being recorded, and we will make both the slides and the audio available for download in our resource center probably by the end of the day, no later than tomorrow morning. And we'll also send out an email letting you know that the information is available for download. Before I get started as well, if you have questions, if you could put them in the question box. I tend to like answering questions at the end so I don't get disrupted as I'm moving through the presentation, but there will be a Q&A session before we end this call. Putting people before numbers. Most organizations really support an up or out development mentality. And this model, kind of that up and out, is really supported by the current performance review system of attaining the best rankings to remain at a company. Employees are not managed and developed based on their unique talents. More so, it's about how well they've done in the performance review. We're putting really numbers before people. And these numbers can be ratings of 1 to 5 or descriptors such as an excellent performer or a poor performer. Companies are focused on identifying and selecting small talent pools with high potential leaders for future roles rather than on thinking about the entire workforce and developing lots of different small talent pools that have many, many people, not just at the director or executive ranks. And in many companies, most employees right now aspire to the highest levels of a position within their department by selecting a linear career path up the ladder at the expense of developing broader skills. And this happens for many reasons. Sometimes it's company culture is discouraging employees to look outside their department. Sometimes employees don't know how to search for careers internally. They might not have access to information. And opportunities are not presented laterally, nor are they supported. So these things really limit organizations from putting, what I'm going to say, people before the actual numbers. Now, I believe that employees are ill prepared for new challenges and opportunities that companies are facing on a daily basis. If you take a moment to think about the transitions in your own company, maybe transitions that you've gone through internally as a result of downsizing or mergers or acquisitions, with significant events like this, organizations often have to move employees around, putting people in roles that they've never held before. And in these cases, employees need to learn a whole bunch of new skills that were not taught in their prior role or school or career. They must now become learners again rather than practicing or leading in those roles. They have to go back to the basics and think about how they're going to develop new skills to be a contributor within your organization. And that can be challenging, it can be overwhelming, it can be frustrating to employees when they're wanting to figure out what are they going to do with their career. And so these types of challenges, in addition to the rapid job rotations, make it hard for employees to adapt. So what we've seen in a lot of our customers is a massive shift from in their career landscape. where in the past we used to move up the ladder. It was very predictable. We could stay in a role for 2 to 3 years, and then we would move up in another 3 years or 4 years, and then we'd move up. What's happening now is there's such shortages of skills, especially at the leadership levels, that we are starting to put people who aren't ready for roles in these positions of greater authority, and they're not ready. And we're putting them in those roles, and then we're expecting them to adapt quickly. We're expecting them that within a year, we're going to take our current and existing job performance review, and we're going to rate them, and we're expecting them to be a 5 within those 12 months. Well, that's really hard to do because this job, as I said earlier, might be a role that they've never held before. They might have been forced into a role because of economic conditions. And so when we're thinking about that performance review and we're thinking about employees that are going through these rapid job rotations, it really makes it hard to measure performance effectively. And I'd like to explore a particular example with you. So let's think about an employee that, and this is a real case, was in a manufacturing role. That employee has worked in a very operational setting where they had to learn very specific skills, oftentimes working on machinery, becoming proficient in a part of a machinery, and then the whole machine, and then the whole system, and then the whole process, and suddenly they get acquired. Now the employee can no longer be in that role because there was a duplicate skill set. But they wanted to keep this employee because they were a great performer. So they say, let's put this employee in HR because they're good with people. Well, as you know, HR requires a different skill set than a manufacturing role, right? They need to develop people and have people persuasion skills, and they have to be good at consensus building and be an inspiring leader to promote change across an organization. All skills that were not needed in that particular manufacturing role. To make matters worse, this employee had no predecessors. Some of the existing employees that were in the HR department have been moved, so there's really no one to even be a mentor to this new person in this role having to lead this HR group. So, that puts an employee in a predicament, but at the same time, this employee is expected to perform within 1 year, as I said, because it's an up or out culture. If you don't get in the role and you don't come up to speed quickly, and if you don't do well on your performance review, and it's even more complicated when you have it quarterly reviews, because people are taking that, and that's going to contribute to your bonus and your performance. So there's really no way for this employee to gain the level of expected proficiency to receive the most positive feedback and ratings. So what do? They focus on the things that they know best, because what they're really seeking is positive information, positive reinforcement on the things that they know well, and sometimes the role takes on a different identity. So it can cause a problem across the board. Now, what I'd like to do just for a minute is take a poll to think about, how is this employee set up to fail? And so I'm going to launch the poll and give you just a few minutes to respond to the poll. I'll do a couple of more seconds here. Great. Okay, so here is your response to the poll. We had about 3% saying he will not receive any feedback to improve his performance. We have another 3 or 6% saying he doesn't know what is expected of him and he doesn't have a development plan. Most of you answered all above, which is the actual answer. So what can an organization do to fix all of these areas, these 4 areas that we've mentioned above? So let's move on to find out. I absolutely love this slide because it paints a very interesting picture. The man standing on the top of the rock, to me, represents the first part of what I'm going to refer to as the talent management paradigm, where every person possesses a unique distribution of skills, knowledge, and behavior that enables a person to perform optimal in one or more jobs. The rock symbolizes, to me, this person's skills and experiences, all those things they've done to date in their current role at a particular organization. Now, what I like about this visual is the lighthouse under the water. It represents to me all of this particular employee's holistic talents. The problem, though, in most organizations is that employees are only known for their current role. All of their holistic talents, the skills that they've gained at other companies, in their volunteer work, all those experiences, those types of things aren't known to the employee's current manager or to an organization, and it's a wealth of information. So how are we able to, as a development organization, able to identify, cultivate, and liberate all of one's talents in an organization if we only know a portion of the story? And I'd like to explore this a little bit more. There are a couple challenges with this paradigm. The first one is that linear career paths are supported and reinforced by current institutional performance management systems. What we say to employees is that you must perform based on my particular performance review. And if you perform well in this particular review, then we're going to allow you to start to think about a potential career move. And within that career move, most employees, because they've been trained to think up, look up, and plan up, are going to see one aspect of the many ladders that could be available to them. So it's a very limiting perspective. The performance review does not support, because it's a one size fits all, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, the collection of information and in a continuous way tied to a specific role, for example. The second problem is that organizations have no mechanism to identify all of those skills in the lighthouse. So, what does Johnny or Sarah hold that we don't know about them today that could be useful as we're starting to think about our strategic workforce development plan, because we're only using one standard review in our company? So what does that do for us? Well, let's explore the origin of performance as a basis for thinking about career pathing in the future. First and foremost, most organizations that come to Talent Guard say, I want to do performance, I want to keep it simple, I want to use one standard form, I want to evaluate 10 competencies. And we say, okay, that's well and good. However, it is a one-size-fits-all mentality. It's driven by measuring all your specific competencies, those things that are important in an organization, against one company ideal. It does nothing to think about the question, how do we as an organization identify talent differentiation? You can't do that if you're using one form to measure all employees against all things. So it's not an effective use of time. It's not an effective tool if we are truly wanting to understand what is our talent and how do we plan it for the future, and how can we do performance in a way that focuses on people rather than just the numbers. And I think this visual is great because, with the little guy holding the red block, it's you fit in this box, that's where I need you to go, that's the only box that's open, and here you are. So companies, their typical way they're measuring performance is through your annual performance review, or your quarterly performance review, or your monthly performance review, whatever that may be. That one time I'm going to look at you at the time when it's needed, and I'm not going to talk to you again. Now, as we have seen in the current climate, is that the rating discourse. Do we use ratings? Don't we use ratings? Do we use feedback only? Don't we use feedback? How many ratings do we use? Do we use numbers? Do we use scales? Do we use colors? That, and then the generic nature of the appraisal doesn't support the differentiation. Really, to me, what it does, in having done many, many reviews with many different companies, large and small, is it always comes back to the same thing. Performance in its current state is used to drive improvements via negative reinforcement. One, if you don't do the review, or if you do the review, you're doing it for a reason. And if it's you're not going to get a promotion if you're not doing well. You're going to lose your job if you're not doing well. You're not going to get a pay increase if you're not getting well. You're not going to get a bonus. Now, I know that we have to measure results, and that is an important factor. But I think there are better ways to do it. And that is reinventing the performance review to drive improvements via positive reinforcement. How many net new skills did the employee gain? How much more knowledge did they gain? How many more increased experiences have they had? What additional certifications did they gather all throughout the year as a measure to move the needle forward for the organization, to make it more competitive? If we're just evaluating employees just on the 10 commandments of our organization, which are typically soft skills, we're losing out on a tremendous opportunity to gain a tremendous amount of intimate knowledge on each of our employees. Now, what have we done? We've blamed the ratings, I believe, rather than fix the process. So, and you've heard these studies before. The Society of Human Resource Management asked HR professionals about the quality of their own performance management system. And wow, 23% said their company, didn't do performance well. Actually, more so, they weren't doing it well at all. They didn't have high completion rates. They weren't really gathering a lot of important data that they could make decisions on. Now, the corporate executive board had much more astounding ratings. 95% of the people they surveyed were highly dissatisfied with their existing performance management system. And 90% of HR executives believed that they didn't yield accurate information. So I'm really not convinced that ratings are the problem in and of themselves. Rather, I believe it's the one-size-fits-all approach that most organizations are enforcing today across their 6,000, their 10,000, their 50,000 employees. Like I said, most of them focusing on soft skills or values. Then the next wave that we saw was the introduction of, let's only do feedback. Let's do social feedback. Let's just be an organization that altogether gets rid of any rating scale whatsoever. Well, what we're finding, and we support that mode as well, is that it's now not enough information, because some of the pundits postulated that those people who are getting the feedback and giving the feedback are the ones that are most extroverted, and the ones who are most introverted are going to feel the consequences of being that personality type. So, we really need to think about how can we blend the two together to build a much more powerful quantitative and qualitative process that drives the uniqueness of each individual. How can we really support development and growth as a mindset and as a culture? And after I personally have coached thousands of people individually on career development and performance improvement, and I'm a strong advocate that if you set the right expectations and you provide the right coaching, that almost anyone can develop skills, net new skills, in their current and for a future role. However, how do we do it when we have HR people like yourselves searching continuously for new ideas on how to fix the problem? What protocols do you follow? What new programs do you adapt when you've tried so many before and none of them are working very well, and you keep doing the employee engagement surveys and getting the same results? Companies have gone through endless supplies of technology vendors and consultants searching for ways to measure effectiveness and remember the paradigm, and identifying and cultivating talent based on what employees want, not what managers think that they should do. And managers themselves want to be effective coaches. They want to be able to provide adequate career advice to help coach employees on their next career, on gaining new skills, on improving on their experiences and qualifications. But we're not doing enough to train managers on how to do that. I mean, if you think about it, even in school, when we're in college, we're not taught how to develop our own career. There should be a course on it. No, we go to the career counselor in a setting and say, help me figure out my course load. Help me figure out how to write a resume. Help me figure out how to position myself. These are all very important skills that are needed just being in the workplace, just being an employee. And then managers have to be better at that because they have to coach many different personalities and many different types. And then employees truly want to be self-directed in their career development. They want to build a career journey. They want to build a career roadmap. Organizations are promoting that they are enabling it and doing it, but really they're not. They're saying, if you're interested in career opportunities, go to our job board, look at the vacancies that we have, and apply for a job. That is not career development. That is not career pathing. That is not really a proactive approach that lasts long term. It's a selection and recruiting process. So we have to get away from that and expose all your various different job roles, whether you have 100 or 200 or 5,000, and give employees the means to identify what is of interest to them based on their aspirations and based on their interests. So, what do employees need to be satisfied? And we'll launch the second and final poll. Boom. Quick little poll here. What do employees need to be satisfied in their career? And I'll wait another 30 seconds here. Okay, I'm going to close the poll. Majority answered all of the above, which is accurate. You know, what's always surprising to me, no matter how many polls I do or know how many conferences or workshops or people I talk to, everybody knows what's needed. They know that we have to have discussions on career goals and training and development and a career development plan and tools to let people express their aspirations. And we know it, but yet we feel trapped in that. You know, we might implement one solution, but it doesn't tie another solution in, which doesn't tie another solution in. So we can't bring one holistic solution together to solve the problem. And it's not an easy problem. It's actually quite challenging to solve, but there are mechanisms to do that. So I'm glad that you are recognizing the answers in the same way. So let's introduce the concept of career pathing. And when I use that concept, what I'm really thinking about is career pathing is an idea or thought or a mechanism that allows career mobility internally. That's up the ladder, across the lattice, and even decelerating. And I use that term not as somebody who's being demoted, but how can we enable a generation of people who may retire? You know, sometimes in your organization, it's upwards of 30%. What if we can enable them to decelerate out of their existing roles and enter other types of roles so that we make room for people who want to truly move up, but at the same time, we hold that intellectual knowledge internally for a much greater time, while these people can also act as mentors and coaches for people in the company. So I want you to think of it not as a negative, but as an option. And I think it's a good option that people are exploring. Now, organizations, when we think about employees, we think about developing athletes, right? We want to get employee in the role and we want them to be superstar high performers. But as as you have seen with consolidation of layers of management, we really need companies to shift to building pentathletes. So how do we do that? Through the exposure to roles that facilitate development of skills needed for the future. So in this picture, I like it because it says this individual needs to be ready to walk through one of 5 roles, not just the next role. And typically across those 5 roles, there is going to be a shared set of skills that are similar, and then there'll be some skills that are different. And the only way that we can start to move toward this pentathlete concept is through career pathing, where employees are able to see, what does my talent profile look like today? And if I were to move into any one of these 5 roles and develop for any one of these 5 roles, where might my gaps be, so that I, as an employee, can be proactive in how I'm developing skills for the future? Now, we know a lot about employees. We know their hire dates. We know their benefits. We know, most of the accounting data, first name, last name. Sometimes we know the jobs that they've held. Sometimes that information isn't kept in the HRIS. So that information is good. We need it, right? Because we need to operate a business. But that is the basic start. What we need to move toward is a more intimate strategic decision support system. We need information on what makes employees tick. What do they value? What opportunities do they desire now and in the future? What do employees know that you didn't teach them at your company? What skills do employees need to develop or want to develop? Those are 2 different things. How do they learn best? Do they want to travel? What is their personality? So, fundamentally, when we're thinking about employees, we need to give them a mechanism to express all of these different interests in a single area, so that we can search on this information. We can learn more about our employees. We can truly act on this type of data in a more strategic, workforce oriented way. So what do we need? We need a all-encompassing career management strategy. We need to focus on career goals. We need to have discussions about retention risks. We need to be able to track certifications. We need to see this ongoing continuous development plan. How many net new skills are employees gaining per month, per quarter, per year? Why? Because we want to have inventories. We want to search on those inventories of skills and experiences and qualifications. We want to incorporate psychometric assessments so that we know their learning style, we know their personality, because when we're defining what those future roles look like, we are defining them on these types of criteria. And if we can't go search a database, then to make decisions on that, to identify who might fit, right now that kind of moves into succession. If we don't have all that career pathing data, it's really hard to do succession planning. We're using the sticky notes and we're saying that person's good for that role just because they're a high performer in their existing role. Well, as you know, just because somebody's performing in that role today doesn't mean they're going to be a high performer for that future role, because that future role might have a different identity, profile, skills, and experiences that they may not have used in that existing role. On top of that, career aspirations change over time. Think about your own career aspirations. When you got married, when you have children, when you had to care for sick or an elderly person, your role, the rate at which you might want to progress in your career or slow down, your pace, how much work you want to do. You might be able to work 70 hours when you're younger, but you can't work 70 hours because you've got an endless supply of children's events that you need to go to. Sometimes, you might be able to travel the world, 3 weeks out of the month, but because of certain life circumstances, as we're transitioning throughout our lifespan, we may have to stay idle, but that may change again at a future date. We need to be able to express this. And what I call these, I refer to these as more preferences, How do we set our preferences for the stage of life that we're in, so that when we're thinking about different types of careers and you're defining what each role needs to be successful for your organization, we're able to do some comparisons on that data. And without this information, if we don't have it, then we're going to keep measuring talent on ratings and outdated policies. Employees will continue to be shunted along career paths dictated by others, or only accessing standardized career paths, meaning up the ladder. If I'm a marketing 1, I can become a marketing 2, I can become a team leader, and only a few will stay. So we'll continue to have high attrition, high turnover rates, and low engagements on those surveys. But it can be avoided. Now, when we think about why people join, and if we go kind of to the just general recruiting and development process, employees join your company to learn. In those first, 0 to 5, 0 to 10 years, they are learning. They're becoming proficient in some basic skills and some skills required of their role. It's almost 100% learning mode. Then at some point, they're practicing what they learned. They're sharing that. They're exposing it to others. It has a broader impact until they get to some point in their career, 15 years, 20 years later, whatever it may be, that they're leading. And it's at that point where people start to feel that they're shunted, or there's some ceilings that exist in many layers throughout that pyramid. And so what happens? Then we go, well, I have no opportunity. I'm not developing any skills. I'm not learning anything new. I'm leaving. That goes to the, I don't want to stay here anymore. But if we are able to shift to more of a mobility environment where we are going to foster this learning in a company. So when we join, we learn. As we're moving into new roles across the company, it's a lot of lateral movement now. We can practice and learn at the same time. And what we found in our latest millennial study that we did was that as long as the variety of work changed over time, not necessarily that the millennials had to move up, but that the variety of work changed, that they were still learning new skills, that they could try new things, they were more apt to stay in a position longer, so in their existing role, and stay with the company longer. So whether you believe that the gears are floating down or floating up, that's the goal, is to mask that, is to encourage mobility, is to encourage the development of skills, uniqueness of talent, differentiation of talent. And if we don't do this, we are going to be in trouble. In all sectors and in all job roles, there is a shortage of talent, of qualified talent that are going to be able to fill your roles. So we have no choice but to think about that pentathlete. How do we start to develop our internal talent, not just for a position, but for skills that are going to be needed in the future? And we can be transient in how we think about where that talent sits and what rotations we put them in. And it is the workforce of the future. So you may be feeling this pain now where you have talent, but that talent isn't ready, and it's impacting your ability to compete in a market, to put out new product, to put out new initiatives, whatever that may be for your organization. We need to work on the problem right now. And the way that we work on the problem is to recognize that employees want to focus on various different career choices. And the way that we unlock latent competencies and hidden talent in the workforce is to give employees the right tool. And I don't think there's a better quote out there than the one put out by Bill and Ram, where differentiation breeds meritocracy and sameness breeds mediocrity. And if you just pause on that for a minute, I just think it's a great book. And if you haven't read it, I would run out and get it, because they really focus on why smart leaders put people before numbers. And it is the whole concept of skill development, how to identify that differentiation, how to enable people, employees, to be different, not just by the performance rating, but by looking at the whole collective career internally and using that to your advantage in the marketplace as you're developing talent. Now, career pathing is a mechanism that puts people before numbers. And how does that happen? Well, there needs to be 4 factors in place, and these 4 factors are a part of career pathing. It enables an organization to capture important career knowledge via a redesigned performance review. It enables a comprehensive and periodic talent assessment. And by that, I mean skills, experiences, qualifications, and preferences, not just your performance review of your values and behaviors. The ability to serve up a visible way for employees to seek much broader career opportunities. And then an aggregation of all of that strategic information in one single place so that decisions can be made. Predictive analytics can be served up. Prescriptive development plans can be created. And Talent Guard has an approach to career pathing that I'll briefly share with you. So on the first point, when we're thinking about the redesigned performance review system, what we think about is each person has a job role. They also have a job history. And in those job roles, if done right, there are a set of experiences and expectations that you require of someone to perform in that role. Unfortunately, these expectations or competencies or qualifications aren't made visible to the employee beyond that job description on a job site. So if you can make it so that it's visible and you can set the desired proficiency level, employees and managers can start to provide feedback all year long. And if you want to use ratings, all year long. And as you're providing ratings and feedback, the development options shift over time. So as you're changing the ratings on each of the items, the development options dynamically change. And why is that? It's because we don't believe that development is static. We believe that development is unique and it's personalized. And we believe that as you develop over time throughout the year, you should get different development options based on that development. It doesn't matter if you're a superstar. Superstars should also develop. It doesn't matter if you're a low performer. A low performer should still develop. And this is a little bit of that prescriptive nature of development. This is one mechanism. Now, if you think about it over time, as someone is going through and we're capturing data on their job roles, there is a snapshot that is happening, which leads to a very comprehensive skills inventory. You should be able to capture all of the skills that an employee has gained over time in your company and make their skill area or their talent profile, whatever you want to call it, very rich and robust. Now, I don't know of any organizations that are able to do that today. If you ask yourself, if I said to you, Jan, how many skills did you develop in your last role as HR manager? I'm like, I don't know. Well, how many skills have you developed now in your current role? I don't know. Well, guess what? Now we have a mechanism to do that. We can capture that history, we can capture current state, and we can capture future state. And that is an important thing for an organization. So that periodic assessment, it's dynamic, it changes as you change, you update it often, your manager updates it often so that it's always current. In terms of a visible way, how can you serve up development options if you don't know the kind of career path that one is needed up, across, and down? And what's someone's readiness for a role? What has my past roles look like? How long was I in those roles? How many skills did I develop? And where am I at today? And then where do I want to go? Now, if you think about this for a minute in your own organization, and I've done many, many, many career pathing projects, if we were to map out your entire career lattice, it would look like an airline map from airport to airport to airport. It's very hard to follow. So there is some strategic foresight that needs to go into how do you build out next roles? How do you match roles to somebody's talent profile? And a lot of that work has already been done for you. So this is the third way that you can start driving differentiation of talent. And then finally, once you have all that talent, what y'all need, right, is now a bottom down approach to strategic workforce management. I know what Sally's interested in. I know what Eric's interested in. I have an entire and complete inventory of their skills. I know how they've been evaluated on their performance review, not just the one size fits all on behaviors and values, which are very important, right, because that helps build your culture fit, but also on their job roles and their past job roles. So now I can think about, as I'm wanting to plan for my next general manager who's going to go to the UK, who is going to be in Paris, who needs to speak French and have all of these skills, because we're going to launch a new product, I'm able to do that in an effective manner. Now, all of these factors are required. You can't have one without the other. Otherwise, you're going to be in the same boat that you are today. We need these factors in order to achieve optimal development of each employee. And when I say optimal, that's ongoing. That's somebody who can develop every year, every month, every quarter, every day, and can do that in collaboration with their manager, with your internal counselors or coaches or mentors, and being strategic. And with that information and foresight, we can now move from a selection culture. And if we look at this example, this is typically what happens today in most of the organizations that we start out with. You have 2 career opportunities as an example, but 10 people have expressed interest. And right, these are small numbers. Typically, you're probably dealing in hundreds. Now, 2 are selected for these particular career opportunities. How they got there? Well, we interviewed them. It furnishes positive feedback to the 2 that are selected. It signals interest in career, and the organization shows that it's committed to them. But what about the 8 that were overlooked? It typically is going to support negative feedback. It reduces institutional interest in one's career. And what does it do? It really promotes talent flight, talent risk. These people, because they weren't selected for a particular role, are thinking about, I need to go somewhere else because I feel like I'm never going to achieve that. Now, when this happens over and over again, 2 or 3 times, when somebody's looked over, whether it's for a promotion or a lateral move, they start to become, more negative in the company, and morale definitely decreases. But if we move to a development culture, let's say that now we have 10 people that have expressed a career path, they have expressed their interests, they have ongoing development plans. We can measure exactly how many skills they've developed in which time frame, what trainings they've taken. Now, if we think now about succession planning, what I'm able to do is say, guess what? Why do I only have to have 1 or 2 or 3 talent pools? Why can't I have a talent pool for 50 different roles, or 50 different vacancies, or 50 different X, X, Y, and Z, high potentials with X. So in this case, we could have 3 that are placed in a talent pool, a couple that are placed in the HR pool, some in the customer experience pool, some might just be in the smart whippersnappers who have adaptability at a high level talent pool. What this starts to do is it really promotes an interest in career longevity. It really recognizes people's strengths, the strengths and uniqueness of each employee, of each person in a role. We are sharing with them that we believe that everybody can excel. We're not saying that if you don't get this, you're not going to be good tomorrow. It really builds trust, and trust builds engagement and retention. And I think this approach fundamentally is going to change organizations. And how do we look at it in a much broader way? Well, if we take that example of a development culture, we can now differentiate talent. So what we have access to is Jake's talent profile and Sarah's talent profile. Now, you know that as an internal talent team, you have team 1 And on team one, they have 2 specific job roles that need to be filled. You've defined what the needs are. You know what it looks like. Now you're able to query your entire company. And we see that Jake fits the first role and Sarah fits the second role. But not only do we know that, but now we can look at it from a much more macroeconomic perspective, a broader perspective. We know what team one looks like. We know the skills that team one needs. We know the people that are on team one. And just because these fit the role, we have to also make sure that they fit the team. And the way that you do that is through all of that strategic workforce data that you have. Couple more slides. So when you have that level of information, what are you now able to do as an organization? Well, guess what? You're able to look annually on how many net new skills have you gained as an organization. Isn't that an amazing thing to be able to say to your CEO and your leadership team? It's an amazing thing for a manager to be able to say to their overall team, as a team, we've collectively gained a net new 50 skills. What do you think that does to your overall workforce? It puts you in a better position to compete. You have a higher performing workforce. You are all focused on similar competencies and skills that matter to the organization. You know the kinds of proficiency levels that you have internally. You know how many lateral moves and how many upward moves you've had across your organization, so we can start drilling into this type of information. You can start looking at it by gender, by diversity. You can see, are your SAT scores going up from your cascading goal metrics perspective? We really have data that we can act upon and make decisions as we continue to grow. And with that thought, a couple of points on Talent Guard. As I said, we are a full service talent management software suite. We have performance and comp and career path and succession, 360, development, learning, and certification. We have an entire job role database. We have competencies. We have technical skills. So if anybody is interested in learning more, I'm happy to share that. In addition, we have a ton more webinars like this online in our Learning Center, as well as white papers to support further concepts on performance and career pathing and how the two can tie together to build that talent differentiation strategy. And with that, I will pause and see if we have any questions at this time. And it will take me a minute to bring up the question panel. Okay, just give me a second here. So again, we got one more question. Yes, this presentation will be available for download, probably by later today, early tomorrow morning. And then let me see. One, I guess, comment. The issue is always trying to get budget for development and career pathing with every organization. I agree with you, Rebecca. But what I always tell people is sometimes it's better to start small than it is to start overall. So when we're thinking of budgets, we don't have to think about 6,000 employees. Let's think about the area where we're having the greatest problem. Where are we having the greatest problem? Well, it's typically going to be in one of two areas. Either it's going to be a role that's super high turnover or a department like customer success or customer service. Or other organizations say, I have to have I want to see what people in my organizations are interested in this really hard to fill role, because this really hard to fill role has been open for a year because it requires a PhD and clinical expertise. And, you just can't find these people everywhere. They're they're a needle in a haystack. So how can we start to develop people 3 or 4 years prior for those particular roles? So when you're thinking about budget, see if you can start small on a smaller scale, and then over time, prove the concept, prove the value that it brings to the organization, and then roll it out full scale. And that often is a much easier pitch to sell. Okay, answered that one already. Does the system have the ability to interface between local HRIS, i.e. SAP? We have integrated to 2 different HRISs, not SAP at this time, but we have APIs, like we're an ADP partner. We have a couple other mid-market partners, and we're about to do a Workday integration via one of our customers. So we're testing that out. But the answer is yes. But of course, the answer is it depends on what system you're talking about, and would we have to extend our API to support other data that you might need in your particular system. Steven asks, what do you think about competency skill assessments to confirm proficiency of skills, as opposed to subject evaluation of leaders or even social media circles? So that is one of the premises of this presentation. If that was not clear, when I was bringing up that picture of the skills inventory, there are a couple of ways that can happen, right? At least in our system. One, it can be a standalone. We have an assessment built in that collects all of your skills over time based on your job history and based on you and your manager updating the assessment. The other way that our talent profile gets updated is whenever you take a performance review and you're evaluating competencies and you close out on that program, those skills and competencies get updated in the talent profile. And then the third way is through the 360. If you choose to do a 360 and you want to get more broader context on your skill set, once that 360 is done, you can auto-populate your talent profile. So everything in our system, everything that an organization should use should be based on some standardized competency model, some standardized job role profiles, and it all should funnel into one area for the employee, both setting the expectation of what is required of the role and enabling employees to add skills and experiences outside of that role. So yeah, it fits in. To me, it's the heart of the system, Stephen. How do you address talent hoarding by managers and departments that don't want their people to rotate elsewhere? I love that question, and we see it all the time. One of the ways that we're able to do that, you need software for this, but is to enable your quote unquote talent finder tool to be used by all managers in the organization. So if I'm a manager and I want to see, hey, is there anybody in our company that has skill set X, Y, Z, and J and K? I can, if I have it turned on for that hierarchy, I'm able to see everybody in the company that has that profile, and then make note of it. I can save it as a favorite. I can add it to my ideas of people that I might want to fill into a certain succession pool. If you have succession turn on, I can add it to a pool. That is one way, and that is an effective way to do that, because if you think about two managers in a room and I say, hey, Erwin, I just did a talent search and I saw that Jane has an incredible skill set. Oh, and I also noticed that she's interested in that role, a role that I have open. I would really like to start to talk to you about maybe creating or fulfilling a path, right? So now manager A, because all of the talent data is there, it's transparent. You get to determine as an organization of what you want to expose, but I now can access it. HR can access it. Your executive team can access it. And we could have managers access it. And I think that is a nice way to get managers to act as better managers and coaches. If you don't develop your own employees in those roles, they might find someone else internally who will. So you could have some interesting dialogue just around that one feature in a particular system. And then Brittany, do you see this tool leverage globally or more US? The tool is actually used globally. I mean, we today have clients in the UK, Germany, South Africa, Mexico, Canada, because we have global clients. And the beauty of career pathing, in my opinion, is why should you limit what employees want to pursue? If somebody wants to go work in the UK, why shouldn't you expose a potential career path opportunity for them? If they want to work in the engineering department and they're in product management, why should we limit them? I think by one, you get to see what they're interested in. Two, you get to query on it. You have a much richer pool from which you can then start doing succession planning. So these tools are used globally. And when you think about globally, the things that you have to start to think about is, well, what languages do we want to offer it up in? And it's a multi-tenant system. So, how does that work so that, people people can use it in their native countries. So those start to become more of an implementation question over a use question. Any more questions? Okay, one more question came in, and I know that if you have to log out, I know we're right up on that hour. Please feel free. But I would love your feedback if you thought this was effective, useful, the format, the level of content. I really want to make these useful for you. But Pat is asking, as employees become more mobile throughout the organization, how do you manage return on investment for the manager? Wow, that's a great question, Pat. I've not been asked that before. Well, if we think in value the concept of we're a developing organization, a manager is also a person who is developing talent. That manager we have to think of in the same vein as we are developing the manager as well. That manager has the same opportunity in an equal playing field as any employee would. But what we're able to do for the manager is to say, one, I think it goes back to Erin's question of how can we get employees to have better discussions about talent mobility? I think that's one benefit for the manager. So the second one would be that they now have clear visibility, not just into performance rankings, but what strength do they have on their team? If the team wanted to recommend doing a new project, could they do it with their current bench strength? Or would they have to go acquire some other talent within the organization? So truly going, wow, I had no idea that on my team, I have, of all my 20 members, they were all rated at a high proficiency in financial agility. So what can I do with that data? One, I can make lots of decisions. I can think about leveraging that talent across maybe other committees, other groups, becoming more mentors for other areas of the company that might be struggling. So, we can start to open the door and start asking those types of very strategic questions internally. And I would say, what other ideas might other people have for how that could be used as a return on investment for the manager? So, I'm happy to share all of that data with everybody as those answers come in. Okay, so we're a couple minutes past the stopping point. I'm happy to keep answering questions. I don't have anything for 30 minutes, but if y'all are done and want to sign out, then we can call this the end of the webinar. Again, I really want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to share it with me live. And this information is available. And if you want to email me, I think I put my contact information in the beginning of the webinar, linda.ginac@talentguard.com. And without further ado, I'm going to say goodbye and have a great week.